All right. Hello, YouTube. I'm live right now. This is my first time going live, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but it's okay. I will tell you one thing I'm doing is I'm writing a story, and the story that I am writing is called, let's see, I'm going back. The name of the story that I am writing is called The Cactus Labyrinth, The Illusory Existence for a Child Model Growing Up into Hell by Geoff Stirling Jr. Hey, Rhett, am I interfering with your transcribing of data right now?
I don't know, but we'll see.
I'm doing a live stream. I've been live streaming for 1 minute.
Where are you live streaming on?
On YouTube. It's my first ever live stream. And I was reading my story that I'm writing. Sitting on a comfortable leather chair and watching the endless barrage of mindless sports entertainment on the Idiot Box, I am confronted with the paradox that the comfort I experience offers because I am in the most precarious of predicaments one can experience in this day and age. I won't bore you with the administrative details of the bureaucracy that more or less oversees the happenings of my life, nor will I ask for any sympathy nor condemnation from the reader. All that I ask is that you follow me down memory lane. My earliest memory is playing with the Fozzie teddy bear, one of the characters from Jim Henson's The Muppets. I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area and moved to Malibu when I was 2 years old. I lived in Malibu from the ages of 2 until 4, so the memory of the Muppets character definitely took place in Malibu, which is where my sister Lydia was born. I have vague memories of her in Malibu, as well as my brother Jesse, who is 8 years older than me, and I was present at the time to explain that the stuffed animal was named Fozzie. I also have memories of the sounds of the waves breaking, as a private beach was our backyard, accompanied by, I'm adding the word by right now, accompanied by the warm Southern California sunshine. My family and I moved into the drier, warmer heat of Wickenburg, Arizona when I was 4 years old. And I have more concrete memories of this locale. This was where I spent my preschool and kindergarten tutelage. At around the same time frame in my life, my family and I vacationed in southern Italy amongst the Amalfi Coast. I had inflatable flotation contraptions on my upper arms, as this was the early 1980s. Nowadays, such contraptions aren't used by the youth. I have fond memories of swimming in the warm Mediterranean Sea. I was completely blissed out on a boat, sucking warm milk out of a bottle with a pacifier at the end of it. I called this warm milk bottle my baba, and while I enjoyed this nourishment, I twirled my long blonde hair. It was kind of like this, with my index finger on the back portion of the top of my head. So I used to go, and I'd be like, my family and I had a connection to Italy through my mother's side of the family. My maternal grandfather in particular was very fond of his Italian heritage, born in Naples, Italy, with the birth name Salvatore Pietro Giuliano. He would later change his name to Stephen Peter Young to avoid being labeled a WAP with his business dealings as a real estate agent in La Jolla, California during the 1950s. As I knew him in his later years of life, he was a tall man of portly stature, as he loved his pastries, particularly Entenmann's cheese-filled crumb coffee cake. Grandpa Steve, as us grandkids called him, could write and speak in Italian rather proficiently, while he also spoke in a perfectly normal American accent. During another vacation in Italy, when I was perhaps 6, my sister was 4, Grandpa Steve figured that putting us in a horse-drawn carriage would be a swell idea. The coachman of the buggy did not speak a lick of English, and us two youngsters could not speak Italian to save our souls. So Grandpa Steve was the glue that brought the situation together. He conversed with the horseman in Italian, which to my sister Lydia and I sounded more intangible than the way grown-ups sound in a Peanuts cartoon. You know, kind of like wah 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 wah. But really, it's more like. After this conversation, Lydia and I were placed in the buggy with the complete stranger without much instruction from Grandpa Steve, and off we went. Like, brum, 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 brum. I felt a sense of freedom and adventure with the situation and enjoyed the experience, while my sister could not have had a more adverse effect to what was happening. She started crying and hooting and hollering and screaming at the top of her lungs. My mood changed in an instant from absolute ease to complete tension and agitation. Not a thing could be resolved. The stranger started conversing with us in a foreign language, and my sister and I could only respond in simple, immature English. This was to be my first and not my last experience in extremely uncomfortable situations. Once we returned from Italy, my memory jumps to being on the couch in my family's ranch-style house in Arizona and looking out the window at the trees, the brown earth, and some flat V-shaped seeds the tree was spewing. I would deeply meditate on these seeds in quite an in-depth degree for a 4-year-old mind. I made the association of the seeds with bat wings first. Next, my imagination started picturing a helicopter's propeller in my mind's eye. This association became gathered by observing the seed falling out the top of the tree and rotate on the way down. In the same living room, as the day transitioned to night, I began to get sleepy and fell into a nap. During this time, I was aware of my astral body going up through the ceiling and into the ether of the sky. Next, I regained my consciousness, rose from the couch, and transitioned to my bedroom to sleep. A few days later, in the same living room, I turned to my father and asked him for a baba, which I so enjoyed while vacationing in Italy. My dad poured some cold milk into a regular household glass and passed it over to me. He spoke to me, saying something to the effect that this was going to be the way I was to drink milk from now on, and I wouldn't be getting any more babas. I experienced my first feelings of disappointment. There was a trampoline in the backyard that was put into a hole that was dug in the ground so that the springy tarp was level with the surrounding grass earth. The trampoline was rectangular in shape, and the experience was quite freeing. To sprint barefoot on the grass, leap over the springs and onto the tarp of the trampoline, which was on a level playing field. The grass lawn beyond the trampoline went on for at least 60 yards before the earth turned into rock landscaping, which surrounded a trampoline and swimming pool. In the opposite direction of grass and swimming pool amenities from my center on the trampoline, there was a playhouse. Within this child fortress, there was a toy kitchen with cutlery where I learned the rudimentary concepts of cooking food and eating. Upon continuing in the same direction around the property, the house also had a pyramid room, as my dad was and still is a trippy guy. My father's pyramid room was where my father spent his time, mostly meditating and sometimes taking naps. He had a guru named Swami Sham, whom, being from the hippie generation, decided to assign my middle name, Sham. Sham is a Sanskrit word which, loosely translated, means pure, dark blue, sky, space. My father, Scott, had also traveled to Egypt, where he had been in close proximity around and within the Great Pyramids. He was fascinated by the mystery and energy surrounding these rectangular structures. He had a theory that meditating in a pyramid-shaped room would better allow for the astral spirit to transcend the body and enter the spirit realm. The pyramid room was austere in that there was no television, fireplace, or toys. He had a bed in the room as well as some cushions by which one could sit cross-legged or lotus on the floor. The architect who designed the room made an error in designing the entrance-exit portal in the room. He made the door extremely heavy and fickle, and for this reason, the latch broke and the door apparatus was never properly fixed. My parents had a party and a man started messing with the door, which then fell on top of him and shattered his leg. Upon seeing the accident, another man who was a Vietnam veteran started suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. In his mind's eye, he was back in Vietnam, witnessing his dead American GIs being hauled off in body bags. This was triggered by the man lying underneath the heavy door, hollering in pain. The Vietnam vet started shouting, "Body bags, I see body bags." Luckily, my 4-year-old self was not present to witness this incident and only heard about the event through family storytelling at a much later date. I would spend what I perceived as eons jumping on that trampoline. I stared out into the sky while jumping and looked at the near full moon in the late afternoon desert springtime. I had learned about astronauts like Neil Armstrong, who was the first to travel to the moon. I was told by my parents. I thought about what that experience would be like to travel there, what the ground would feel like, and what the experience of donning a spacesuit was all about. I also thought about how far away the moon was from me. One time, while I was jumping on the trampoline, while accompanied by my brother and his older, bigger friends, our weight exceeded what the tarp could maintain. As we were jumping, my eyes became fixated on a tear in the middle of the tarp. As I focused my gaze at the tear, I could hear ripping, and we fell into the earth that was dug out to accommodate the bouncing contraption. The earth underneath the trampoline should have been scary to me, but the reality of the situation was quite the contrary. I was fascinated by the realm that I found myself in. I could see roots from the plants in the earth, as well as rocks and worms. I was aware that there were snakes in Arizona, so this was the only aspect of the experience that I was apprehensive about. I was accompanied by my older brother as well as 2 of his junior high school same-age friends, so I felt safe and secure and even excited about the experience. The space underneath the trampoline was shaded from the hot sun, making the area comfortable and fun to play in. On another occasion, while I jumped on the same trampoline, my pants started feeling heavier than they did before. Then the realization dawned on me, on my newly acquired consciousness. I pooped my pants. Burner. I ran to the house and told my babysitter about my mishaps. She assisted me in getting my denim jeans off, removing the turds, flushing them down the toilet, and then reinforcing in my consciousness the existence of the potty, which was significantly smaller than the toilets the grown-ups used. She was one of 2 babysitters who would alternate babysitting my sister and I during this stage of our lives, and their names were Tuesday and Wednesday. By asking my dad about my babysitters' names, I was taught the names of all 7 of the days of the week. On this occasion, I reported to one of them, I don't recall which one, that I had soiled my pants, and I got the help I needed to alleviate the situation. My mother, like most mothers, had my sister and I take baths together in the same bathtub at this young age. She had us bathed in her bathroom for some strange reason. My parents' bathroom was not your typical bathroom. There was a statue of a woman's female form with breasts and a pelvic region that was rather obscure and not developed, as this was a sculpture. This was my first conscious memory of being attracted to members of the opposite sex. I got close to the sculpture, which was proportioned to the same size as my 4-year-old body. I got close to the statue and pushed my privates against this cold, smooth, and bulging pelvic region of the statue. While I did this, I placed my hands on the adult breasts of the statue. My mom observed this behavior and giggled. I was left to wander the grounds of the Wickenburg house unattended quite often at this time. My mom made the comment that I like to beat to my own drum. I also had a kind, accommodating demeanor, and my sister, on the other hand, was very bossy. When playing with my sister, I basically let her dictate the playtime, and I followed suit, even though I was the older sibling. My sister had her own bedroom, which she never slept in. Rather, she had a bed that folded out from underneath my bed, and this was where my sister slept. I had a child's bedroom that only a descendant of the hippie generation like my mother could dream up. There was wallpaper of clouds and rainbows. There was stuffed animals of unicorns and Miss Pac-Man. My mother made every effort that she could to make the childhood of my siblings and I pleasant. This included a rich litany of VHS movies, toys, and the rudimentary video games that were available at this time, Atari and ColecoVision. My favorite superhero at this time was Superman. I watched the movies with Christopher Reeves and loved the music of the theme song. The idea of the superhero was also who was virtually indestructible other than one weakness, captured the imagination of my young mind. I was obsessed with not only viewing Superman on television and playing with Superman toys, I was obsessed with being Superman. This was accompanied when my mother bought me Superman pajamas to wear at bedtime. I was not aware of whatever department or retail store my mother bought the pajamas. The pajamas fit the narrative of the stories I read about in the comics and viewed in the movies. That was a costume that came from me this was a costume that came to me from Krypton, from my real parents who died when the planet Krypton was destroyed. For this reason, I was not satisfied with the way the cape would Velcro to the shoulders of the costume, because as soon as I laid down at night to go to sleep, the cape would unfasten and detach from my costume. Being of the Virgo star sign, I was and still am obsessed with attempting to make everything perfect, just like my idol, Superman. My mom accommodated my fancies with regards to my superhero cape by hand-stitching the real fabric onto the portion of the pajamas where the Velcro was. Once my cape was intact, my next order of business was getting my hair just right. This was accompanied after I got out of the bath and applied an insane amount of gel and mousse in my hair. After my hair was parted, which took virtually no time whatsoever, I then fussed for extensive time on getting the thin strand of my hair to curl perfectly in the middle of my forehead, just like Superman's hair. This costume became my identity at night, and when my sister wore my Superman pajamas, I found this even more insulting and annoying than the fact that Lydia could not sleep in her own bedroom and had to sleep in my bedroom. I was an accommodating little boy, though, so I put up with this and did all I could to accommodate my little sister. Plus, I lacked in the skills to form my own opinion and set boundaries at this time. My brother Jesse was and still is really into Star Wars, and so, by osmosis, I became really fascinated by Star Wars as well. The family living room contained a big screen TV, which in the early 1980s was a rare thing. The television was square and as thick as a moving box, and unlike the flat screen television, which displayed the image directly on the screen in high definition, this one had room below the screen for a fold-out mirror, which bounced off the image coming from 3 color projectors below the screen. I climbed around the projector often, and Dad did not encourage my rambunctious behavior. This was to be the television where I first began viewing the Star Wars films. It blew my little 4-year-old mind when I'd see Jesse playing with the figurines of some of the main characters, as well as their spaceships and bases. There was Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the Millennium Falcon. And one of Jesse's prized possessions was a figurine of the original Mandalorian, the bounty hunter, who was not available in stores, but only through a mail-in form that came with having an entire Star Wars collection. Besides the figurines, my family also owned an all-black cat at this time, which was named Jedi. I loved Star Wars so much. I had Star Wars sheets and blankets with images of Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and an X-Wing fighter. Jesse was a patient and playful older brother, a perfect playmate. He would pretend to be Skeletor, and he would let me play He-Man. the good guy from the Masters of the Universe lore. Jesse also would play the skull-faced villain character very weak to appease me and by acting very hurt when I swung my toy sword at him. I enjoyed watching many programs on the big screen, 3-projector mirror-reflected TV. I love cartoons. My favorites were Scooby-Doo, Transformers, G.I. Joe, and He-Man. My dad discouraged G.I. Joe. He thought the program was war propaganda, and being a hippie from the hippie versus Vietnam generation, war propaganda wasn't too groovy. Besides the cartoons that came on via television, there was also a VCR connected to the television, which played VHS cassettes. And this was a decade before the DVD was invented and the internet came into fruition. My mom and dad liked to smoke a lot of ganja and space out, so dealing with me was not a priority, as was explaining how to navigate through this tricky thing called life. We oftentimes hired babysitters and even more often plopped me down in front of the television to mostly watch Disney cartoons. We got VHS copies of fantastic Disney cartoons that were not available at that time for purchase to the general public. I greatly enjoyed viewing Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Cinderella, and Peter Pan, among others. I also loved Annie, the musical, and Pete's Dragon, which offered me some of the first deep emotional feelings through Julie Andrews' beautiful singing of Candle on the Water. I didn't understand why the vibrations of her singing made me cry, but I knew that I was experiencing a deep-seated emotion in the human psyche, and that was beautiful. My mom was an aspiring actress in young adulthood, and after doing background work on the Michael Douglas TV show, The Streets of San Francisco, she was awarded her own awfully unrealistic line, "Hey, I thought these were supposed to be gag gifts." She gave up on her acting aspirations after she became romantically involved with my father, Scott. However, she kept on her payments of her SAG, or Screen Actors Guild, membership fees. This was possible through the affluent enterprises of my father, as my mother's SAG dues far exceeded any meager royalty that she received through her one-liner on the television program. When I lived in Wickenburg in this early time of my childhood, I loved playing in the swimming pool. This is where my father would spend quality time with me doing activities like swimming underwater with myself on his back, which gave me the feeling of flying. I also used to literally fly momentarily when Dad hoisted me out of the water by cupping his hands underneath my feet and using his 6'2" frame to launch me. Dad was an accomplished skin diver, so he taught me the trick of spitting into my mask and rubbing it around the glass so that when I had the mask around my head underwater, fog would not obscure my vision. There was a hot tub in close proximity to the television, or to the swimming pool, and I can remember feeling warm and fuzzy and spacing out, looking at the light reflecting off of the surface of the water. When I squinted my eyes, these sprinkling reflections looked like a cartoon entity that was alive, yet more resembled the form of a lightning bolt than a human being. I made these twinkly light reflections my friend. Looking back now, I must have felt very lonely, and this was only a way to cope. One time when I wasn't in the hot tub being comforted by my imaginary friends, the twinkly light reflections, I was in the house and my family decided that they were going to go for the evening. Mom took Jesse in her car and Dad took Lydia, my sister, in his car. Each parent thought the other had me in the car as well. I was left behind in the house while the rest of the family went to a restaurant or the movies or whatever they did without me that night. I became very frightened. The moment I found out what was happening, I was alone in a big empty house with nobody to keep me company. I tried to find as many light switches as I could to protect me from the dark. I went into my parents' bathroom and looked at the reflection in the mirror and took in the fact that my eyes were red with the tears dripping down my little cheeks. My memory fades to black. There were many lizards that I observed during my childhood in my family's home at Wickenburg. One time, there was a hairy tarantula that had posed lifeless by the window in my older brother's room. I never viewed any rattlesnakes during this phase of my life, but I would later in life. I also enjoyed wandering around the kitchen. One day, I found a green canister shaped like a Pringles box, so I tried to open the container. The top didn't pop open, rather there was a grid at the top where I could shake out the ingredients like a salt shaker. The food, as I thought the byproduct of the container to be, was a fine green powder. Green is my favorite color, so I got excited about my perceived food that I discovered. I poured out the food, and I found the green powdery substance to be quite yummy. Only later, as I reminisce on this incident, do I realize that I was eating the toxic cleaning agent called Comet. On another occasion, I was hanging out in my older brother's bedroom, and I saw a Hansen's lemon lime soda aluminum can sitting on a table. I noticed that the can was open, but still mostly full. I love that soda even more than Coca-Cola, which is a lot, so I drank from the aluminum can. I was immediately grossed out because the can was full of urine. Perhaps my older brother did not feel like going to the restroom to urinate. I don't know, but I was the recipient of an ill fate that day, and Jesse had a Hansen soda can filled with piss out on display. In the same bedroom that contained the Hansen's urine-filled soda can, I decided to enter on another occasion and lock the door. I then crawled headfirst into a sleeping bag and zipped myself in through the inside zipper. Next, I stood up and waddled around. I thought this would be really fun, but I quickly realized that this was the epitome of the opposite of fun. This was suffering. My sense of seeing was disabled, and I was in utter darkness. I could only go by my sense of feeling and my young, limited memory of Jesse's bedroom. The temperature was also very unpleasant, as I felt way too hot and I began to sweat. My consciousness suddenly became overwhelmed with a dreadful, constricting, and claustrophobic experience. I came to the realization that I was trapped and did not know the way out of the sleeping bag. I started yelling, straining my newly formed larynx in all the air that I could muster to make the loudest sound vibrations possible. I understand that the thick materials that made up the sleeping bag were muffling my voice. I understood that. My claustrophobia and intense heat soon became accompanied with feelings of worry, panic, and loneliness. I started to question the moments that were pregnant with horrible feelings, creating a labor that seemed like an eternity. Why wasn't I being helped? Where was the cavalry to help me? Where was Han Solo flying the Millennium Falcon to come and rescue me? After many torturous moments of being left to my own devices and circumstance, which I created with my naive and inexperienced 4-year-old mind, I finally heard the faint wrestling sound of a locked door rattling. My thoughts were optimistic as I remembered that I had locked the door before I got myself into this sleeping bag pickle. I figured there was no way for my rescuers to pick the lock, allowing for my doomed fate. Thankfully, I was wrong. My mother and my brother were somehow able to penetrate the obstacle that I had set before them, and they got through the barrier that was the locked door to Jesse's bedroom. They then grabbed my ankles and pulled me out of the sleeping bag. I would later, upon studying Greek mythology, learn that this was the way I was grabbed. It resembled Achilles being pulled out of a mystical water well, making him able to withstand anything except around the Achilles. This would eventually result in my demise, in his demise, when an arrow shoots him there. Once I was removed from the sleeping bag, I felt an intense relief. The temperature of the room felt so much cooler than inside the sleeping bag. I felt very blissful as I went out into the living room and watched He-Man cartoons and drank a cold glass of milk. I had what may have been my first sense of relief from going go from an extreme claustrophobia, uncomfortable hot temperature, to having total freedom in a nicely air-conditioned living room. My sister and I had same-age friends that lived next door named Johnny and July. One time I slept over at their house and I couldn't fall asleep. I kept attempting to relax my body and mind over and over again, but to no avail. My first time sleeping at a house other than the one inhabited by my parents meant I experienced my first all-nighter. I attended kindergarten while I lived in Wickenburg with my family. I was a very spaced out child and experienced challenges when introduced to the structure, rules, requests, and learning. I had no qualms about learning my ABCs because the learning of that was disguised with a song, and I loved music. However, putting the letters of the alphabet together and forming words was way over my head while the other children were getting it. I didn't have very many male friends, but there was a girl named Jenna that was my first crush. We would sometimes cuddle during the time allocated for taking a nap. I did not know how to take direction very well. I think the challenge was that I was a people pleaser. So when asked to do something, I immediately would answer in the affirmative that I could do it, even when I really didn't understand what these big humans were requesting of me. One day I was asked to deliver a message to some other classroom. I was given the coordinates to the office number, turn right, turn left there, but they might as well have spoken the directions to me in Pig Latin. The words were interpreted by my young mind as utter nonsense. Upon exiting the classroom, the directions I was given dissolved into utter nothingness. All I experienced was the warm and beautiful Arizona desert sunshine and the swing set all to myself. I ran around the playground until the warm, dry air caused a burning sensation in my lungs and throat. My brother had told me of animals called wolves. I think he liked the way I could not pronounce the word and would say wolf. I thought of the animal, and when the warm air moved in and out through my lungs, I associated the sensation with my limited understanding of that animal. I thought of myself as having wolf lungs, and also made the association with the children's nursery rhyme, The Three Little Pigs, and The Big Bad Wolf. I also made the association because I seemed to not do what the big grown-ups asked of me and was scolded and shamed for my behavior. I developed this association, even at this early age, that I was inherently bad. At the conclusion of my kindergarten school year, my teacher consulted with my parents about her concern for my abilities at learning, recommended that I be held back 1 year and repeat kindergarten. My Aunt Patricia, who was a school teacher herself, got wind of this news and assured my parents that I would be okay moving on to the first grade because she would tutor me. So that summer, tutoring me was what she did. Around mid-June, my family and I moved to St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. There was a street we moved to there, Winter Place. My dad rented a house across the street from his dad, my grandfather, Geoff Stirling. Just like clockwork, and sticking by her word, my aunt tutored me to learn to read. I can remember the moment when I put the sounds of the letters together to form a word. You're reading, I was told by Patricia. I was finally in the consciousness of putting letters on a page together to form sound vibrations that could be interpreted by myself as well as those around me listening. Once I was immersed in this consciousness of reading, I felt the process was so easy, so effortless, I could not understand why I was unable to read before. In my family's house on Winter Place, my siblings and I would hang out with the neighborhood kids, and I made the discovery of the pleasures involved with paying a visit to the corner store. My favorite item to buy was a slush puppy. In the States, it'd be basically a Slurpee. My favorite item to buy there was called a slush puppy. My favorite flavor was cherry. I oftentimes watched television cartoons on my sister and some of the neighborhood kids in our living room. With my sister and some of the neighborhood kids in the living room. The cartoon that stayed permeated into my long-term memory was Raggedy Ann and Andy. My sister and I had the dolls to coincide with the cartoons that we watched. There was a part where there are various candy figures that start melting away like a mixture of dream figures and a psychedelic trip. And this so fascinated me because candy, for me at this stage of my life, created an altered state of reality where everything in my world became one with the sweetness and texture of the candy I was eating. Sometimes staying inside the house made me feel claustrophobic, and I felt like I could not bear another moment of such an environment. Perhaps I felt this way because of my earlier experience in the sleeping bag. On one such occasion, I went outside to the grass of the front yard of my family's winter place home and sat there for some time, plucked out a few blades of grass, let them go, and watched them blow in the wind before they joined the same earth that they were once attached to. After I got bored of this, I moved onto the sidewalk and placed my bottom on the much harder concrete surface. I thought about the coolness of the texture and the way I could feel my bones. Then I thought about the peculiarity of how my apparatus that was placed on the sidewalk was called butt in Wickenburg, Arizona, and bum here in St. John's, Newfoundland. Next, I saw a highway of ants patrolling. This was the time where I first discovered my attraction to members of the opposite sex. About 4 houses down the street on Winter Place lived the Royal family. That's their name. They're called the Royals. There was a girl there around the same age as me, maybe a year or two older, named Julian Royal, as well as another young girl 3 years older than me named Mary Claire. Julian was a tomboy type with messy, long, light brown hair, hazel eyes, and a girlish, pixie-like face. Mary Claire was more feminine looking with beautiful, long, curly blonde hair, an angular chin, light blue eyes. Let's see. Lost my place. Light blue eyes and a prim and proper demeanor. However, Julian was the one I fancied. One day, Julian humiliated me, which paradoxically made me crush on her even more. I challenged her to a race to a certain point on the street. I was feeling confident as I had a nice bike, which had just gotten the training wheels removed. The cadence went, on your mark, get set, go. I struggled to get speed going on the bike's pedals while Julian's legs moved in rapid fire across the pavement. She got a sizable lead in front of me right off the get-go, and although I gained some ground once I got my pedals going, I never did make up for her sizable lead. I had to let my defeat sink in. My mind went into a conundrum comprehending this because coming from a male-dominated household, the idea of a girl beating me in a challenge created a shame in me, even at this young age, that seemed incomprehensible. One evening, the royal family slept over at our house in number 2, Winter Place. There was also a boy around the same age named Ian, who was my friend. We were all hanging out in the bedroom, which had several stuffed bears displayed on a shelf. At this site, Jillian told me a story that I found fascinating. She said that the stuffed animals are actually living entities. She used simpler words that come to life and move when we aren't looking. I was and still am, as a matter of fact, gullible, so I believed her. Besides the Royals, there's another family in the neighborhood that established relations not just with the young Stirlings in our household, but also the parental Stirlings. This family was the Vallases. The Papa Bear of the Vallis household, Keith Vallis, was the right-hand man executive with my father, G. Scott Stirling, who was then vice president of the Newfoundland Broadcasting Company, a media conglomerate who oversaw a horizontal media presence in Newfoundland, Canada television, NTV, radio, Oz FM, and print, the Newfoundland Herald. Keith Vallis had 2 daughters named Katie and Jay. As I got older, Keith and Janine, comma, his wife, would birth a third child, a boy named John. They lived across the street from us, and my family later obtained their house from them, and they then moved in across the street into number 4 Winter Place, which was a bigger 3-story house that my grandfather, Geoff Stirling Sr., lived in for many years with his respective family. Once the Ballases moved to number 4 Winter Place, my grandfather moved into a residence on a beautiful 100-acre property in the town of Middle Cove, Torbay, which we simply codenamed Motion, because the property was right by a rugged bay in the cold maritime Atlantic region. The coastal region of Motion was exactly that, a motion of waves, tide pools, and the like. As the summer turned into winter, my pastime of crushing ants in the driveway and losing to young girls in speed contests progressed into snowball making and throwing. This was a rite of passage instilled upon me by my older brother, who took great glee in pelting me with snowballs to the face if I was not quick enough to retaliate and throw countermeasure snowballs right back at him. During this same winter season that I learned to make and throw snowballs with my brother, on another occasion, he took me for a ride in a Ford Bronco he was assigned to drive by our family. He took me through a shortcut in the neighborhood, back through an alleyway around Winter Place. He, like most teenagers, was showing off and inexperienced with his newly acquired driver's license, and as a result, lost control of the vehicle in the slick ice and snow on the pavement and skidded into a post marking in the fence, marking the boundary of the alleyway. In processing what had happened, Jesse got frustrated and dropped the F-bomb at the top of his lungs. My mom was set into overdrive, processing what had happened. My mind was set into overdrive, processing what had happened. Not only had I heard my first naughty word, I also had experienced my first automobile accident. During this time frame of my life, I was not an outdoor kid, nor was I very athletic. I spent an inordinate amount of time after school on my rear end, on the couch, watching television, or in the playroom playing with toys, who were usually characters associated with the cartoons I had seen on television. These toys associated with the characters on the television were more real to me than the actual real boys and girls I spent 8 years per day in a classroom with in first grade. My first year of moving to St. John's, Newfoundland, I was very blessed to make friends with the neighborhood children through business and social interactions facilitated through my parents. I was not so lucky, though, in the classroom. There was a disconnect where my toys that I played with, associated with the television characters, were more real and important to me than the narrative in my head, than the actual living and breathing classmates whom I went to elementary school with. I attended school in the first part of my first grade year at Vanier Elementary School, right out of Logie Bay Road, which in the same street were a group of media businesses my grandfather founded. I would bring up pristine new toys with me to the classroom. One day, I brought my WWF World Wrestling Federation rubber figurines of Hulk Hogan and Jake the Snake Roberts, along with an actual arena for the figurines to wrestle in. The early autumn months in Newfoundland, although brisk, can actually be a splendid time to be outside. There was a plethora of trees on the island, all filling the atmosphere with an abundance of oxygen. The trees shed piles upon piles of leaves in an assortment of vibrant hues of orange, brown, and red. The school's teachers there know the advantage of sending their children on guided field trips into the great outdoors once in a while, as opposed to keeping them contained in never-ending cycles inside the classroom setting. So off we went, down a beautiful path among the neighborhood, complete with trails lifted up above the wet marshes by wood planks. The trails also went along rivers and streams where, even as a youngster, I was in awe of the beauty of nature. I felt an intense sensation of bliss. When I returned to the classroom setting after the field trip, my emotions went from one extreme to the other, an extreme high to a terrible low. My wrestling arena where my toys could engage in combat were still there, but my beloved wrestlers that my aunt and cousins taught me about were not. Where were they? I knew for a fact that I left them inside the ring so that I could make them do a battle. Now they were not there. I told my teacher about the situation, and after some time, she could still not retrieve my beloved wrestlers, which was especially a bummer since the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan, was one of the casualties. This was my introduction into the world of theft. I began to realize that the older children, or the other children in my class, did not have as many toys as me, and that they could steal from me, and that the big people could not help me get my stuff back. This was a sad day indeed, and the joy of enjoying the outside air and scenery was replaced by misery. The school was called Vanier, and one of the cool things about the school was that they gave us much time teaching. They gave us much time teaching us physical education. I was introduced for the first time in my life to the game of basketball. The game was so much fun, bouncing the orange ball against the shiny, glassy urethane that coated the geometrical wood boards and made up the surface. I had watched basketball even at this young age of players like Dr. J, so I got spiked with feel-good endorphins into my brain as I received the basketball and ran down the court, dribbling the ball in what seemed to me like perfect coordinated, unified steps to ball dribbling ratio. Then competition reared its ugly head. A circle of young bodies descended upon me to impede my progress. I stopped in my tracks, planted on my feet, and looked for an able body on my team by which I could dish out the ball, or as I would later nickname the Rock, to. My teammates did not get into a position where I felt comfortable passing the ball, and my opponents started closing in on me fast. I left my feet, jumped to a safer spot to find an open teammate, and the play halted by the screeching sound of a female gym teacher's whistle. I was frustrated and confused. I was completely absorbed in the game. Who did this gym teacher think she was to blow the whistle and stop the game? I will later come to find out that the gym teacher had all the authority vested in her to blow the whistle. I had double dribbled. This was my first introduction into the notion that to play any sport or game, one had to conform to certain uniform rules. On another occasion, in the same gym class with the shiny glassy urethane that coated the geometrical wood boards, we were assigned various teams to partake in relay races. The gym instructor assigned to coach us on this occasion was male. As he explained what was expected of us to partake in the race with our team in a heavy Newfoundland dialect, my bodily functions became overtaken by the need to urinate. I raised my hand and asked the gym teacher if I could please go to the bathroom. In Canada, the toilet amenities are referred to as the washroom, not the bathroom. Just like the cleft cheeks making up one's rear end have the difference of being referred to as a butt in the United States and a bum in Canada. Perhaps my use of the word bathroom was what opened up the miscommunication that was to follow. Rather than simply answering in the affirmative of yes, go to the washroom, the gym coach repelled my question and bounced the energy right back at me with a question imposed upon in a heavy Newfoundland dialect. The question went something like, "Boy, you sure you got to go now? Can't you wait?" I didn't really understand the question. All I knew was, yes, I had to go to the bathroom, and I had to go now. I answered in the affirmative to the question and thus started the conundrum I would find myself in. By saying yes to the gym teacher's question, I was inadvertently saying, yes, I can wait. This was to be a blunder in communication that would later change the trajectory of my elementary school tenure, as well as create a pattern of being rescued by my mother. The children and I in the gym class began our relay races, and all that I could do to take my mind off how uncomfortable my body felt was to stare at the reflection of the lights bouncing off the gym floor and how these reflections contrast with the painted squiggly lines outlining various facets of the basketball court parameters, as well as various games played on the court. My bladder was swelled up to a point that had become so unbearably uncomfortable I couldn't participate in my favorite activities that the elementary school had to offer, nor engage in the idle conversation of my peers. Finally, with the flash, the uncomfortable feeling went away. I forgot that I had to pee. Every aspect of my physiology suddenly felt wonderful. My body was tinged with an overwhelming sensation of relief, creating bliss. Then reality set in. "Geoff peed his pants!" cried a random boy out of one of the relay team lineups. This announcement ignited an explosive eruption of laughter and glee from all of the children in the entire gymnasium. All the children, that is, except for me. I then looked at the clean, clear gym floor and looked on in horror at the contrast between that and a puddle of yellow fluid which traveled like a wave over a sandbar. In my tiny imagination, this yellow pool traveled across the floor might as well have been a tsunami. Similar to the early incident in Wickenburg, where I was left behind in this huge house, the gravity of the situation of the moment overwhelmed me, and my consciousness fades to black. My next memory is being alone in an abandoned, unrecognizable classroom and putting on some dry undergarments that were not mine. My school teacher, who I did recognize, announced to me that my mother was on her way to come and pick me up. I would never set foot in Vanier Elementary School again. My parents transferred me to St. Pius X, private Catholic elementary school. This school was another 4 miles drive down from my family's house. Once I began attending classes there, my wardrobe changed from whatever my parents decided to dress me up in to a fixed uniform of a green V-neck sweater with the Pius X embroidered emblem to the left over my minuscule heart. There were some choices as to what was worn underneath the green sweater: a collared white shirt or a turtleneck. As far as the coverings for my lower extremities went, the choices were khakis or corduroy slacks. These limited options were to be the clothes that would cover my body from 9 a.m. in the morning until 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Monday through Friday for the next 5 years. Upon starting second grade at Pius X, I sat in the front of the classroom and flashed a peace sign to the boy sitting next to me, simultaneously throwing up a peace sign and also indicating that I felt like a big shot. Being in a newly acquired grade level. Mom usually picked me up at lunch, but I also enjoyed the amenities of the school cafeteria from time to time. This included a choice between a hamburger, a cheeseburger, or a corn dog. Another one of the amenities of Pius X was the Catholic Church, which was on property, part of the school, and part of the curriculum. Attending Mass was very foreign to me, and I had mixed feelings. Sometimes I was very bored, spaced out, and I felt disconnected. And at other times, I felt very interested and experienced the same connection to the divine that I experienced before I went to bed when my father told me Bible bedtime stories. As was usually the case in my early life, I was still very distant from my classmates and found more realness in watching TV and playing with toys than I did with my school chums. These feelings were exacerbated by negative experiences with my limited child interactions, such as the classmate asking me if I was a girl or a boy, which really pissed me off even then. I got home a number 2 winter place, looked for some comfort from the loneliness and misunderstanding I experienced at school from children my own age. I wandered into my parents' bedroom in their absence. There was a television in the room, and I began watching the network that my father helped his grandfather run, NTV. At around 3:30, 4 o'clock, my favorite show at that time, Knight Rider, would air on their network. I was fascinated by a computerized Pontiac car helping David Hasselhoff's character navigate through life and bring justice by bringing the bad guys to justice. I should probably say, like, bring bad guys to jail. Where was my computer friend to help me? Where was Kid? After the show ended, you know what? I've been on the air for 57 minutes. I'm good. I'm going to call it. That's it. I'm going to end the stream. Thanks for watching. Geoff Stirling Jr. signing off. Take care. Peace.